Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. As Sarah said, and thank you for the introduction, Sarah. As Sarah said, my name is Deanna Mayers, and I'm currently the Director of Curriculum for BlendedSchools.net. So my goal this afternoon was to take you through how we take practicing teachers and turn them into course designers. And then we share those courses across our membership as kind of our model. And then those teachers we're hoping, we've built some capacity in them, and they go back to their regular classrooms that may be face-to-face or blended or could be online also. And they take the skills we've taught them in curriculum design, instructional design, and technology skills and apply them to their day-to-day teaching. That's kind of our overall mission and where I was planning on going today. What I'd like to do is, I'm usually pretty good about watching the chat and talking as I go and answering questions woven into the presentation. So feel free to give me any questions in the chat as we go along. But before we even get to that point, I just want to know if each of you could just put real quick in the chat what you're hoping to gain, from this webinar today. Do you want to know about teacher professional development? Do you want to know about course design? Just real quick so I can get a feedback as to making sure I'm fulfilling your needs of the live audience today. And as I see those coming in, I'll try to take that under advisement as I do my canned, quote-unquote, presentation. So moving right along, I'm going to give you first a little bit of background of what and who BlendedSchools.net is. And I'll get in a little bit of trouble today if my CEO is in the room because we have changed our name. We are now referred to as the Blended Schools Network. I'm having a hard time giving up the BlendedSchools.net, and most people know us by that. But we are a not-for-profit organization focused on K-12 education. What we provide is, and my main role is this curriculum piece. We provide about 192 master courses that can be copied by our membership, customized, and used in our Blackboard instance. So that's kind of my bucket, is to maintain, create, develop, and train teachers to develop that curriculum, most of today's focus. The technology we provide in our membership is, of course, Blackboard, and then a lot of the partner tools that work with Blackboard, like StudyMate, Respondus, things like that we lay on top of our Blackboard instance. We also provide extensive professional development as part of the membership, and that can be live on site. It could also be, we'll do a lot of webinar type training like this. We also do completely asynchronous online learning, or PD. And then we have a 24-hour help desk system and support services for the technologies of our membership. So that's kind of what we provide. So we provide pretty much everything you need to do a blended learning or online learning initiative except for the teacher. And we kind of hang our hat on the idea that we come in and we help districts, schools, counties, private academies, whatever it is, to build capacity, and their teachers teach their own kids. We give you everything else that your teachers would need for that. I'm just scrolling through to kind of see. Looks like it's kind of PD. I've got 2 responses. So if you haven't yet told me kind of your goal of to coming today, go ahead and add it in the chat there if possible. So we'll talk a little bit about our model of how we develop courses, and this is all going to really be about course design, curriculum design in the K-12 world. We take practicing K-12 teachers, like I said, and we train them in technology and some design principles, and I'll get into some of the design principles. Doesn't sound like many of you that's really where your focus is, so I'll go pretty quick through those stages to get to the PD part. And then we provide support as they're through the development process. One of the misnomers I think often in K-12, and I you know, you even think in higher ed, is that we've had a really good teacher who's taught a course for a long time and they can just put their resources online and teach online. Well, it's not really that simple and that clean, and developing an online course, doing it well, whether it's being used as a hybrid or a blended learning or a supplement, however that's being used or completely online, it's a time-consuming thing, and it's a very deliberate act and needs to be treated like that. So there's a lot of PD that needs to go along as you do that. So don't think that you have a great teacher and in a month they could just put their courses online and start teaching online. It's a little bit more complicated than that. So during that whole process that they develop, and for some of our teachers they might take 3 months, some of them it takes 6 months, some take a full year. But we meet with them weekly to support them through that. And sometimes we will actually have teachers work in what we call mobs. It's really a team of teachers where we have a team leader who's been an experienced developer, and they work with their team members to develop maybe earth science. And we might have 10 people work on that course. Usually, though, it's an individual effort, but not always. So let's dig a little deeper here. We do for our curriculum design and our content breakdown, we use the backwards design model, which just means that a lot of people refer to this also as understanding by design. We start with teachers first to identify what's the absolute essential content that students need to know when they're done with this online course. The reason we use that and we start there is because sometimes in an online environment, we're not bound by time, and we're not really bound by, you know, a physical location. So we kind of, teachers throw everything but the kitchen sink and the kitchen sink in there. And we want to focus our teachers on making sure that we're only including the things that are absolutely essential for the students to learn for the course, and we don't get too big. A lot of times you'll hear students talk about the online course is much harder. And 9 out of 10 times the trap that they have fallen into there is that because you're not bound by a time thing and you can just keep adding on, the course is much bigger and much more rigorous online, you know, because we don't have those timelines. So the next step after we've kind of narrowed down what our essential content is we start designing the assessments. And when I mean assessments, I mean your summative assessments, your big unit level assessments or your chapter level assessments, your midterms, your finals, those type of things. Those real high stakes parts of your course we design next. We take teachers to the idea that assessments are not just fact recall type assessments, and we'll get into that in a minute, that they're more project-based and more developing deep understanding of content. And then very lastly, after we've got both of those things identified, we get into actually putting in the lessons and the instructional units of content so that the actual quote-unquote teaching piece of the course. So it takes a while before we ever get to the idea of creating items and putting in videos and assignments. This is probably 1 and 2, at least, depending on the pacing, it's probably at least 25 to 30 hours of work in just getting 1 and 2 done. So the kind of planning, I told you we focus on that essential content, prioritize and narrow down the most important content. This in itself is a professional development goal for teachers, for them to kind of really re-examine what they teach. And we always, when we hire designers or we hire teachers to become designers, we always try to hire them from a perspective of this is something they've taught for a while and they know the content well. So this is a time for them to reflect on how they've taught earth science in the past and what really is important to that course for those students to move on. Sometimes we use this graphic. If you're an understanding by design person, you've seen this graphic before, but we try to get them to focus on the most important core ideas, and then we get into the know and do, you know, the skills and knowledge, and then just the fun stuff that's worth being familiar with. We can still let them include some of that, but they don't, you know, that's on the outside realm. That's not something that's imperative that they learn. Then we design what's called these curriculum maps here that we map out. It's pretty much like a rough draft or an outline of your course before we've ever even gotten into Blackboard or anything else at this point. And then again, we determine what are the assessments. This is in phase 2 of the process. We take them through what is acceptable evidence of those key terms. We've already decided what's important. Now, what's acceptable evidence that they understood what we said was important, and making sure that they are getting it, type thing. So we do talk through a whole list of the different types of assessments that we that are possible, and these are just a short example of a few. But we're real tight on the idea to make sure the assessments match the learning goals, and try to keep that very, very well aligned, and that will help them be more successful content developers in the future, or when they move to the next stage, because they've kind of created a box as to what they need to design within once we've done the assessments and the essential content. We do require a couple of different types of assessments. We require that every one of our courses has to have, at the end of a unit or a chapter per se, we use the term units because we don't use textbooks in our courses, and chapters often think about textbooks. So we talk units, and we talk semesters as a course, and 2 semesters together make a full K-12 Carnegie credit unit. Okay, those are kind of some of the terms we use. But at the end of every unit, we have what's called a GRASP, or an authentic assessment there. It's project-based or product-based, and they all use this same acronym in the same format so that it's consistent across grade levels and across content areas, that at the end of every unit our students can expect that there's going to be a project at the end that's going to have them put them in some sort of authentic role. There's also going to be a traditional assessment recall skill item that's done in the test manager of Blackboard. Both of these things get done before they start planning their lessons of content. Now, a lot of our teachers do come back to this and tweak this depending on how their lessons flesh out. So then the third stage, again, is they're actually going to start creating lessons and content in their lessons. I'll go a little faster here. This is an example of what's in every one of our units and what's in every one of our lessons. Again, because I'm all about consistency across courses and across grade levels where possible. So at every unit level, I talked again about that authentic situation project and that knowledge skill test, and that they need to be mapped. There is that curriculum map so that students and teachers alike can see that map of exactly all the content that they're going to be expected to master, understand, know, do within that unit. So all that happens on every single unit view that you'd look at. And I'll show you some screenshots and maybe go live here in a little bit. The next, every one of our lessons has at least these components in them as a minimum. They all start with a do you know, because remember we are always designing direct-to-student consumable, which is really the essential question for the lesson. But it's a question that students should maybe be able to make a legitimate answer to that question by the time they finish the lesson. The next step is the getting started activity, kind of a hook, anticipatory set, depending on what era you grew up in. You know it as different things. Some people call them bell ringers today. So we have that. And then we have an intentional note-taking prompt. We have found that it is important to be able to include this in there And we often give them graphic organizers that fit exactly with, whatever type of content they're dealing with. Our direct instructions for right now still comes in instructional videos, kind of like the huge initiative with the flipped classroom. Someone could just take our instructional videos and flip a classroom pretty quickly. We use Kaltura to deliver those videos. Then we have multiple lesson activities that are from interactive and collaboration type activities. We provide usually about 2 to 3 at a minimum in every lesson, and then our teachers sometimes can hide or delete or remove them or move them to another lesson if it's not appropriate for their kids that are taking the course at that particular section or time. Because remember, we create master courses that teachers copy and then they edit based on the students in the room to differentiate. So this is one of the big places that they do a lot of that differentiation. And then last, there's a check for understanding. This is just a short formative type assessment. And I'm going to give you examples of these in a little bit. But this is really meant for the students to check whether they've understood and they can answer back to this essential question up here when they're completely done. We use these guiding instructional strategies to clarify understanding as we go along, and I'll show you how these are intertwined. These are Marzano's research-based instructional strategies that show the largest gain in students, and I have this cited at the end if you want to read more. But these are the topics that I will deliberately train my teachers on these. And at first glance, you're like, oh, we all know about homework. We've been doing it for years. But we talk a lot about good homework, bad homework, and what homework looks like in an online environment. We go through each one of these as part of our training when teachers become designers. And we only pick these 9 just because they're research-based, they're fairly easy to implement, and teachers get them pretty well. There could be others that you choose, but these just happen to be the 9 we focus on. So let me show you a little bit here. This is an example of where you'd see the essential question as the do you know at the beginning of a lesson. And it's just a simple little item tool. We put and when we do this part, teachers learn how to create an item if they haven't done it yet. Just a real simple, getting their feet wet kind of thing. For setting objectives, we do a couple of different things. This setting objectives, remember, goes back to, this is going to walk you through, oops, sorry about that. This set of 9 things is what I'm going to walk you through, how we do these in our lessons and how we train teachers to use these. So that setting objectives type of instructional strategy. We do that here in the do you know question a little bit. We also do it in that getting started activity that I talked about. A getting started activity for us does kind of set the objective to what students are going to learn during the lesson. And we talk a lot about what does that look like for that lesson. It's never the same thing. I showed you an example here of just plain old text. Here it's an Go Animate video that they have created that kind of explains it. It could be simply a web link. It could be an image. It could be a drag and drop activity that's designed in SoftChalk. It could be many things, but the idea is instructional, that it's going to set the objectives for the students for this lesson. So here's some more examples of how that getting started can do that. Here's one here that's bringing in a video from National Geographic. Here's one that's done a simple whirl because it's bringing in the concepts that are coming across. Could also be a joke, cartoons. You get the idea here. This is all about getting started and setting those objectives. So some examples of how we do that note-taking prompt. I will take teachers through about 75 different graphic organizers and note-taking organizers that we have kind of assembled throughout the years. and they decide which ones apply for each lesson, and they can use those organizers or they can bring their own in. Some people even try to do like a closed statements for the lesson. Some people do notes from PowerPoint for here. It just all depends on the user level and the grade level, the rigor of the content, that type of things for the note-taking. But we do talk about how important note-taking is done constructively. We also do this lesson vocabulary. This uses StudyMate online version. The reason we don't use StudyMate class is we've had some glitches in our course copy issues with using StudyMate class, so we just published to StudyMate online and put the web link in here for our lesson vocab. Just some information about research note-taking. I'm going to skip through that kind of stuff. We do talk a lot when we talk about note-taking about it not being a verbatim process, that it's a process that allows them to organize their thinking and organize the new content coming at them from the lesson. A lot about, we get into that note-taking and flowing into this summarizing of a lecture, because remember, summarizing was one of those instructional strategies, and how that they can watch these, pause, rewind, take notes, listen to it a second time, whatever they need to do in order to take notes throughout this piece of the lesson. Some examples of some of the organizers we use. This is just 3 different types of T-chart kind of feels to them, and teachers get really good at being, if we give them a structure and then they tweak it to match exactly what the content is they're working on. Some more of the advanced organizers we look at. So we'll kind of go through those. Here's kind of a part of our direct instruction looks like for our students, where they have a video player. You've all seen these now that the flipped classroom has become so prevalent. The one thing we tell them is that their videos cannot exceed 5 minutes. One of the reasons I do that is research says that high school students can tolerate about 5 to 7 minutes of on-task watching something happen. So we try to keep it to the low end. We don't let them ever exceed 5 minutes. If they have more direct instruction that needs to happen, they break it up, and we have multiple lessons in there. But we do take teachers through in the PD part on how to create these video presentations and the guidelines of good audio, bad audio, not just reading to the kids, annotating as they go. And we talk about all those different points of creating a good instructional video. We also use some examples of some of the learning activities that we require them to put in. We always look for variety. That's the big thing, is variety, variety, variety. This is just a simple internet activity. Here's an assignment that requires some reflective understanding. Here's just a simple sorting activity that grades them immediately and gives them feedback on how well they understand the terms. I want to take a moment to reflect on non-linguistic representations, just a fancy word for images. And I thought this was interesting that research has shown us, now if you're like me and you've been around for a while, instructional or educational psychology was kind of telling us that we store things in word form. We don't just store things in word form. We store them, in today's kids, at least today's brain, stores them both linguistically and visually. So it's really important for us to talk about and gives kids opportunities to connect words with images. And so I would challenge you to make sure that you have that discussion with your teachers as you go through PD for online content, that there's a need to find a way to build imagery constructively in, not just put an image in for sake of images. So here's like a hotspot activity. This one's done in soft chalk, but you could easily do this in the Blackboard test questions and build a hotspot activity that gives kids feedback with the images. This is just a simple jigsaw puzzle that could be done in many other ways also. It kind of makes them really concentrate on what this hydrogen bond looks like. This is what our homework and practice looks like when we design it in an online world, because it's all interactive. It's all direct feedback to the kids right away, so that they get information that here's what you did wrong and try again. We always have the philosophy that all of our quizzes and formative assessments students can take as many times as they want to raise their score, because every time they take it, it turns into practice. So that's just our philosophy. When a teacher copies it, they can change that if they choose to. That's not their philosophy. It's also extremely important to make sure you have collaboration inside of every lesson. We have a collaboration and reflect piece on every single one of our lessons. And a lesson for us is about an hour to 3 hours of instructional content, just as a meter for you. Try to get them to think again about the big idea and to reflect on their writing as they go along, and you can kind of see where the prompts are in here. We spend a lot of time talking to our teachers about writing good questions and good prompts. Oops. And then lastly, every one of our lessons will end with some sort of check for understanding, like I talked about. Here's an example of one that's, whoops, sorry, jump into Unit 1. Every lesson ends with a journal prompt. And that journal prompt does two things. For us, it's a place for students to collect their electronic word-taking document so that they have kind of a virtual notebook to refer to of their notes. And it also gives them an opportunity to reflect on a question or a journal prompt. Sometimes it's just the essential question that was introduced at the beginning of the lesson. This is a non-threatening way for a teacher to come in and grade a journal prompt and give students feedback, redirect their learning if they're a little off, or if they're way off. You tell them to go back and review this part of this video because this might help you clarify your understanding. Or maybe go take a look at this website because you're weak here. That type of thing. That's what the intent of this journal response is. Plus, it's to get writing in every single one of our courses. At the end of a unit, here's an example of what one of those GRASP projects that checks understanding on a larger scope for the full unit and not just a lesson area. I'm going to skip through a few here because I want to get to where the PD part is. And then maybe if we have time, I'll backtrack back to some more of how we design the courses and the steps, the more detailed things of what we take teachers through. But I know we're 1:30 and I'm thinking that I was supposed to go to only 1:40. So I want to make sure I get to this PD part. So how do we get teachers to really understand this, and how do we deliver the PD for this? So we do a couple of different ways, and I talked a little bit at the beginning of the session about this. The first most essential way that I have found in the last 5 years of doing this with blended schools, and even prior to that when I was doing it in a fairly large school district in eastern PA, is kind of sequestered into a developer's retreat, and it's not even a kind of with blended schools. We absolutely sequester them. Once we've kind of decided who's going to develop courses for us, we'll pay for their room and board, and we bring them into a hotel, and we put them in a couple of large rooms, and they're given on-site face-to-face PD from blended school staff and people that have worked for us before. This is an opportunity for a couple of different things to happen. First, it is we deliver just that fairly mundane tech skill stuff, like I talked about with the videos. Well, we might spend a whole morning on good video design, and here's the technology tools. So, we use Screencast-O-Matic, we use PowerPoint, and we use the Blackboard IM whiteboard. They bring the things onto the whiteboard. We show them how to screencast the whiteboard area, how to use the whiteboard tools in BBIM, and deliver their PowerPoint good audio, things like that. So that might be a sample of one of our sessions. And there's usually a morning session and an afternoon session, and they learn and then they apply. So they might learn how to create those lesson videos, and then right after that they create a lesson video for the course they're designing immediately with us in the room. But not just us are in the room, because we do this with probably 50 to 60 teachers at a time. And there are teachers if you've ever gotten that many teachers in one room together, they turn into this amazing collaborative body, and they just start helping each other and talking things through. And the conversation I've heard happen well beyond the idea of the tech and the training tools, when they start talking about, well, I taught it in this sequence when I had more success this way. And even though they might not be developing the same courses, they might both end up talking about a certain sequence of algebra, or how I do integrated science and this person still does it by physical, life, and chemical, or how that goes. They start having those very dynamic conversations, and they develop a kind of I don't want to even say cohort, because it's not even a good enough word. They're almost like a family, developer's family. So after they spent 5 days together, or 4 days, it's usually 4.5, 5 days, and they're with each other from breakfast till 11 or 12 o'clock at night sometimes, that they'll work through the evenings. They really develop friendships and partnerships as they go, when they go back home and they now finish their development process or move forward. They have those people to lean on, and often, we focus on using BBIM as a conversation tool and as an interaction tool for questions and whatnot. They'll help solve each other's problems outside of anybody from blended schools having to help them, which is really a great dynamic. And it mimics what we're hoping to have happen in our K-12 classrooms. So if we put teachers in that learning role, that they're kind of working together as to do this project, it gives them a glimpse inside of how we want to see their classrooms changed, and they get that when they're done. So not only do we just do that sequestered developers retreat where it's very focused on each of the components. We do weekly meetings. So every Monday night, and I don't know why we do Mondays, it just happened. Every Monday night at 8:30 at night, between 8:30 and 9, and we never meet for more than 30 minutes. We meet in Blackboard Collaborate like this, and we talk through just-in-time training. If we've noticed that there's a lot of people that are confused about this, so say we might have done developer retreat training on the lesson videos, but everybody's running over the 5 minutes when I'm checking their stuff, or when Chris, my counterpart, is checking their stuff. We'll reiterate that in a weekly meeting. Or they'll bring questions for us that they're running into, concerns they have. It's just it's really to keep track of them and to keep them motivating and moving. I've noticed that when this does not happen, quite often they kind of fall off the cart and they don't finish their project. We also then give them individualized training. I know I focus a lot on BBIM, but we spend a ton of time. I am almost always have my BBIM open, and feel free to search for me if you're a BBIM person, because I love to have those kind of conversations on the fly. So if they have a question and my light's green, they're supposed to ask it right then and there so that they can keep on moving. We do some face-to-face work sessions individualized if we need be to move teachers forward. And then we do, like I said, maybe more focused online meetings like in Blackboard Collaborate outside of this weekly meeting piece. So that's kind of the 3 tiers of training. We do the kickoff with the big developer retreat, then we do the weekly meetings as we go. Usually this individualized happens when we see that there's a developer in distress and they need some extra lift up. What do they learn? Here's an idea, and I've referred to some of these. We don't just, if you notice, it's only 25% of what we do is tech tools. But here's a sampling of what we usually train them on with tech tools. We do not just train on soft chalk or just train on Blackboard. It's all built into one of those instructional strategies that I talked about earlier. So if I'm showing them how to use Test Manager in Blackboard, then I might be focusing on the instructional strategy of non-linguistic representations. We're always hitting curriculum with the tool, or instructional design with the tool. Here's the processes that we go through. We also talk a lot about, like I keep going back to those instructional strategies, the question and prompts, standards alignment with the mapping focus, and then we do training on ID with color image use, not just to use an image for image's sake, use it for an instructional point. Placement choices, this happens a lot on any visuals we use. Make sure that you're not using yellow text that's difficult to read, or don't use words wrapped around an image in the center. You know, just things that we sometimes take for granted, we deliberately talk about. We spend a lot of time on copyright because that's one of those things that's so easy to forget about in today's digital world. So we do spend a lot of time on what Creative Commons licensure means versus what's public domain versus what's got a copyright on it. So we spend quite a bit of time on that. But these are kind of the four main areas that we focus on in PD. We hit all of these during the retreat, and then we circle back around to all these during each part of those weekly developer meetings, just as reminders as they move through their development process. They're given a developer checklist so that they can kind of remember why and what components are important. And I know this sounds silly, but they love it. They print it out and they manually check these. And even my young teachers, even the ones that are 27, 28 years old that I'm working with, that you'd think would not need this or would want it some size digitized in Evernote or something like that, they much prefer having this paper-based thing that they do, and it's just a guide for them. I don't do anything with these at all. It's just really for them. This is just one page. This is a very extensive document, by the way. Now, after all the development's gone and is done, and the developer feels like they're done with the whole course, we go through a couple of other stages. And of course I have a checklist for that too. So the next one we'll go to is peer review. You know, because I'm the curriculum director and I could review their course, but if it's Spanish 3, I am not going to have a clue whether it is rigorous and if it's correct for accuracy. So we go out and look for another highly qualified educator in that position, and there they act as the peer reviewer, and we give them a checklist here, and this is just some partial screenshots of this, but nothing, you know, it's not everything that's on that document. And then they give that feedback to me. I don't have peer reviewers go directly to the teacher, because what I have found is that teachers are really hard on each other. So I don't want them to get overwhelmed when they get feedback. So I have the peer reviewer send it to me, and sometimes I can just send it right on along to the teacher, or the teacher developer. Other times, though, I need to say, this is just way too picky. I'm going to water this down. I'm going to take this out. I'm not going to pass that on. You know, because we don't want to discourage the developer, because they put in hours and hours and hours of work. And you get back, it's kind of like writing a term paper and it's all red when you get it back. We don't want to see that happen. So, but we go through the peer review. We only do one stage of this. I wish I could do more, but just because of our budget and our timelines, we can only do one. And then we have some final steps here where we go through a technical review, and that's the part I do, where I look for course structure and flow, which I skipped all those slides in there. I could share that with you more. We have a very lockstep way of what we expect in every course. So I'll go through that technical review piece, make sure all the teacher files are there, all the raw files, all the all the rubrics, all those kind of things, make sure they're there. Then it goes to a copy editor who just does wordsmithing, spelling, grammar, that type of thing. If any of these two things throw any red flags, they could go back to the developer for fixing items. Not always do they, but sometimes this will trip it back to developer to tweak some more. And then we have some formal release steps that we go through just in advertising that a new course is available for teachers to copy and things like that. So that's kind of our last few steps before we release a course. So it's 1:45, and I have done a lot of talking with very little questions. So I've either put everybody to sleep or maybe something else. But I'm going to take a moment here to give you some think time and tell me if you have any questions for me. And I did skip a bunch, so I can come back and show you some course structure. I can come back and show you some more of how we implement those strategies we talked about. But I'm going to stop rambling and give you a chance to ask some questions.
If anyone would like to use, to be able to talk to ask a question, please feel free to do that.
Okay, Sarah, I'm not sensing many questions, so I can go two routes to finish up the hour, or do you need some time to wrap up now? So I've got some more things that I can share, or you tell me where you want me to go.
If we don't have any questions, let's just keep going and get in as much as possible until the top of the hour.
Sounds good then. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk to you a little bit about how we organize a course and course structure. This is the type of things that I look at during that technical review stage. Now I will tell you that we start all of our developers with templates. We have found that that's extremely helpful for them. That the idea that just to give them a blank course in Blackboard or a blank lesson in SoftChalk, we use a lot of SoftChalk if you haven't caught on to that yet, is overwhelming for them. So we try to build in those guides where I've talked about all those structured unit components and lesson components. And I'll take you through this a little bit in our course structure. So the way we kind of organize one of our templates is every course template or course copy has this class information entry point as set as the default entry point for our courses. And then we have an introduction phase. This introduction is done by blended school staff and is placed into every single one of our courses. That is just simply a how-to for students to negotiate the technology. How do you turn in an assignment? How do you communicate with your teacher via this? And how do you participate in a wiki? Just the tech tool kind of stuff. We used to have our teachers do that, just on a side note. We changed on that because we realized that all of our teachers were creating basically the same stuff. So we decided that we'd bring that in-house, create it, and make it available. And obviously they can edit that if they want. We go to this type of structure for our courses. So we create a new content area for each one of our units. And I told you we talk units. You may talk chapters. The reason we do this is because we found that if you have one content area where all of your instructional materials are, there's a lot of scrolling and a lot of folders, and students often get easily lost. And we're talking K-12 students, and we even have some kindergartners. This gives teachers the ability to manage to hide the links as they need be, and actually it even helps our developers because it lets them develop in those smaller unit chunks. Okay, so we do have this type of navigation and everything. Because we have a journal everywhere, we have a direct link to the journal out here. And then every course template has these same ideas. And remember, I talked about teacher files. We keep an area, content area, that's hidden from students. It has answer keys, and of course my alarm's going to go off. So I apologize if you're hearing the alarm go off. The teacher files also have rubrics in there. They also have Could have the raw PowerPoint files just in case somebody wanted to recreate a different video in their voice or something like that. The report an error, this goes directly to the Blended Schools Help Desk. So if a teacher and notice it's hidden, so this is a teacher area. If a teacher sees that there's an error in the course and they need help correcting it, Blended Schools will correct that for them. That's kind of the overall view of the first look of our menu structure. Our unit structure, every unit starts with a little description. It has what's the enduring understanding for the unit there. And it tells also the students how many hours approximately this would take them. And we all know that students learn at different paces, and we have this conversation with our teachers. But it gives them some sort of guide of expectations, because we know some units might only have 6 or 7 hours of instruction. Some could have 20 in them. It just all depends on how the content breaks out nicely. So we always have this unit description. We will have unit vocabulary, and again, this is done in StudyMate online. So that our unit vocabulary. This unit vocabulary is all that it's explicitly covered within this unit. So it's not just nice to know or review terms. It's explicitly in this unit. And then each one of these vocabulary terms also is represented in one of the lessons as explicitly taught. So if the unit vocab has 75 vocab items, 8 of them could be in Lesson 1, 13 of them could be in Lesson 2, and so on. You get the idea. We also introduce the project, because remember I said every unit ends with a project. So we introduce the project early on so students know why they why do they need to learn all this information, what is going to be the expectation when they leave the lesson or the unit. And then each lesson is in a folder with the essential question here. And then towards the bottom you'll see where the unit assessment folder is, and that's where the true project assignment is in there, along with that knowledge and skills test that's in there. And then the last thing is this Unit 1 curriculum map, which gives the students that full overview of what's in the unit. Again, with the technical review, the type of things I look for is every lesson must have these components at a minimum in here. They must have the essential question. They must have some sort of getting started or a lesson hook. They must have vocabulary. We've talked about most of these in a more explicit term earlier. Here's the examples of different types of interactive activities that we're looking for, or learning activities. Could be a crossword puzzle done in there, it could be a wiki, could be an assignment, could be an internet link, could be a Quizlet, could be it could be an NBC Learn, could be many other things that show up in here. And then we always end every lesson with some sort of check for understanding with that journal and or a quiz as possible. Okay, and these all kind of fit together to fit a full learning experience for students. We don't recommend, and we train and talk to our teachers a lot about, sometimes we think that only a lesson presentation and a quiz, and that's all we need. Here's your direct instruction, here's your quiz, and maybe read these pages in your textbook. That you need all these different types of interactions to really solidify learning in a lesson for students. Lessons end with a differentiation folder, which is only available to teachers. And in here, it's not just differentiation. Here's an example of what was inside of this folder. It could be remediation, review, extensions, enrichments, or change in learning style type activities, which is true differentiation. But they have other items, so if a teacher doesn't like the web link that we have in the lesson, they can move it down to this differentiation folder and put maybe this new one and use this one up live with their students if that works better for their students. Or they could add it as a second one if they would like. We have a class information section that I showed you in the menu. This is kind of set up as a boilerplate area for teachers, but these all kind of follow the Blackboard exemplary course rubric. They also follow nicely the INACOL and the Quality Matters rubric, requiring the different parts of, what's the expectations for attendance, because attendance is important even though it's an online course. So it's really kind of interaction time and time on task that you're doing here. What's your grading policy, safety concerns, and you see the areas that we have in here. And these are all set up, and then our teachers, as they copy the master, can change these. But part of our PD through our developers process is the need for this, and then writing these overviews and writing these enduring understandings. Some examples of syllabi that we put in. We have a fairly simple syllabus that we put in, and we try to keep this consistent also. But we have course information, and then we have some of the management information. Then we have a listing of the content topics, and then we have a pacing guide that either a student can create for themselves and fill out, or a teacher can fill this pacing guide out, depending on how a course is going to get delivered. Because some of our courses could be delivered during a summer school setting where you want to kind of pace it for 6 weeks. Some of them could be using a semester course as a full credit course, depending on the rigor level, and the pacing would be different there also. So that's what we use these kind of pacing guides for. In there, you also saw a place where we create this gradable items list example. And this is just a quick trick out of the Grade Center of Blackboard. It's just a copy and paste, and the place you copy, we open it up as column organization in the Grade Center of Blackboard. And we copy that whole section, just highlight it and copy it. And then we drop it in here as plain text in Excel. And then there's a little bit of cleanup work, but not a lot. And you end up with this nice gradable items list. We've got a lot of great feedback on this from our teachers and our students, that they really just like being able to have, again, that checklist kind of feel to as they go. What this does for my developers, it lets them see right away the balance and points from Unit 1 to Unit 2, because we talk a lot about balancing. And just not every unit has to be the same points, but it has to have the right weight for the, remember back to that identifying essential content. If Unit 1's got a lot of really super important content in it, it might have more points worth than Unit 2. So we talk a lot about balancing that and that the points are distributed correctly. Any questions on the course structure and why we made those choices for course structure?
Deanna, can you hear me?
I can, Jane. Go ahead.
I apologize, I was late in joining, so you may have already addressed this, but you have provided such wonderful information. I'm just frantically taking notes, so I hope that this will be recorded and made available. But I'm wondering if you have any of the research that backs up the structure of the courses, and there it is. Thank you.
So that's some of it. The things I didn't cite here were those rubrics that I talked about. So this is a lot of citing the instructional practices we put into place. But the rubrics that and I'll just say them verbally here, and maybe Misty or somebody from Blackboard can give them the link to the exemplary course rubric that Blackboard uses. We use kind of a hodgepodge of the exemplary course rubric. Also, we use the INACOL. INACOL has a quality online course rubric. And then lastly, we use a we use some quality matters intertwined in there. They don't all fit exactly my personality and my design structure, so I do kind of combine them and put them in. But those are most of my work cited for this. So hopefully that helps. And as far as recording, I think that one of the Blackboard people can answer that. But I'm pretty sure the recording button is on right now, so I don't know how that'll be shared for you. Diana, you asked. Oh, thank you, Sarah, for grabbing that rubric link. I think most of you will find that rubric is really quite eye-opening and helps your teachers as you go along. Teachers fill in the template you provided, or do you, leadership, fill it in consisting? Teachers fill it in. So, Diana, we give them a template. They fill it in based on the content that, that's by their design, following our guidance. And then when I do the technical review, if I don't like the way they formatted the journal prompts, I'll reformat them. Simple things like that I will change as I go along so that there is some consistency. One of the things that drives me batty is somehow people think that changing fonts is a good thing. We talk about it, about ID in the ID piece, that don't use Comic Sans here and Arial here and Times Roman here. So that's a lot of the cleanup we'll do during the technical review. If they've done a lot of changing of fonts and font colors, I will take all the font, I'll go down to one font, and we change all the font colors back to black. Because we believe that when a teacher teaches with it, if they want to make those changes, go for it. But by design, we keep everything in a black font. Okay. So I'm checking to make sure I don't have any other questions. We are right at 2:02 according to my clock, so I'm going to kind of end here and give the controls back to the Blackboard moderators. But hopefully I've shared a few things that have made you think or reflect upon how you do things. And I'm going to come back here. You can definitely contact me. This is my Twitter. Here's my email, and I am. You can find me on Blackboard IM if you do a search too, if you want to grab me there. But thank you for having me today. I've had a great afternoon sharing with you, and feel free to contact me.